back. We're back on another day and a whole nother year, you feel me? I decided to watch a full analysis on this game, you feel me? I got like 5 minutes in, maybe, I don't know, I don't remember. I got a little bit in and she started making a lot of good points. So I was like, okay, cool. Instead of watching this on my own, let me just watch it with y'all, you feel me? So we can both understand what the hell we just played, you feel me? I'm not gonna lie, I might forget a lot of what happened in the actual game, but hopefully this will refresh my memory, you feel me?
Mouthwashing is a psychological horror game following 5 crewmates aboard a Pony Express delivery spacecraft, stuck together on day 147 of an over a year-long journey. While the game is presented, jumping back and forth through time over the course of 6 months, let's run through the entire story in true chronological order. This is Mouthwashing Explained. The earliest moment in the game shows ship medic Anya completing a regularly scheduled psych eval with Captain Curly. Curly reveals that he's had trouble sleeping recently, suggesting he's distracted by other thoughts. Anya says the last person she needs to evaluate is the co-pilot Jimmy, but she seems uncomfortable with the idea of interacting with him. She says he doesn't take the report seriously and previously reported developing a sexual interest in cartoon horses.
So what I remember me playing the game, it jumped around a lot. So it was hard for me to really understand what the hell was actually happening. You feel me? Cause we would be here and then we'll be over here and then we would jump back further than where we just were and then forward even more and then back again. You feel me? So it was just hard to keep up. It was hard to understand like what really happened first and what happened next. You feel me? The only thing I really understood was whenever we were Curly, that was back in the past.
Such as the company's mascot, Polly. To Anya's relief, Curly offers to do Jimmy's eval for her, given they are longtime associates and Curly had actually introduced Jimmy to the business. She then lets Curly know that ship engineer Swansea is looking for him, and makes a lighthearted joke about his angry note sounding like a fun time. On the way to the utility room, Curly briefly speaks with Jimmy, who reveals that the cheerful engineer intern, Daisuke, was a late addition to the ship, which explains why there's only 4 cryostasis pods inside the utility room, rather than the 5 needed to cover every crewmate. These could be used to keep the crew asleep for up to 20 years in case of an emergency. Curly finds Daisuke stuck in a wad of foam, which the ship auto-dispenses during emergencies in order to prevent holes from opening into space.
So I called him, I was thinking about calling him, like, I was thinking his name was Daisuke, but I didn't want to be wrong and offend people, so I just called him Day, and I kind of slipped up. I remember me slipping up like twice.
Daisuke accidentally triggered it trying to climb into and repair a collapsed ventilation shaft. Senior Engineer Swansea admonishes Daisuke, then requests Curly uses Captain passcode to unlock an axe and cut him out. Walking around the utility room, you can find many notes that Swansea has written for Daisuke, helping him learn the basics of ship repair.
Manage your cables. That's
You
what
see
I
that
need
despite
to do.
his
This
harsh
is a mess over
attitude,
here.
Swansea is genuinely trying to mentor Dai, and also that Dai likes to doodle in his notes, which is pretty cute. Curly retrieves the axe, cuts out Daisuke, and then leaves the axe with Swansea. This is an important lucky tool that will come back later.
Oh, you know what's crazy? When I was, where was I? When I was in that vent or wherever I was, I kept seeing little flowers and I was like, what is this for? You feel me? Now looking back and seeing his damn shirt, it definitely was, okay, yeah, it was the flowers on his shirt.
On the way to the cockpit, Curly falls into a metaphorical lake of red water. Soon, broken ladders and warning signs appear as alarms begin blaring around him. He then walks towards what seems to be the sun. Everything goes white, excluding a single door leading into the cockpit. This disastrous scene foreshadows the upcoming collapse of Curly's position, and his mental state regarding his life thus far.
How?
Curly conducts Jimmy's psyche valve in the cockpit. Then they have a conversation where Jimmy reveals he likes the feeling of control he gets as a co-pilot, which is super not concerning at all. Curly is happy Jimmy is doing well, given that was not the case back on Earth. Some people theorize that Jimmy might have been a convict on Earth, and that Curly originally added him to the team to give him a fresh start at life. Curly is shown to be very supportive and a strong believer that people can overcome their pasts. Jimmy expresses jealousy over how successful the captain is, both in his career and how others perceive him. Curly then explains he feels unsatisfied, wanting more in life than just being a good ship captain. However, he's also afraid of starting over, of abandoning his crew and the career status he's worked so hard to reach. even if deep down he feels a need to escape his life as it stands. Jimmy describes Curly as at the top of his ladder, relating back to the previous scene, which likely represents how the need to climb a career ladder in order to feel successful in life can also make you feel trapped or hopeless. The crash warning signs added in shows the twisting of the hierarchy Jimmy describes, again foreshadowing an upcoming event. In this way, I feel like the Blood Lake could regard Curly's anxiety about his life, or both him and Jimmy's desire to mix up the current status quo. Jimmy wants to climb higher, to have more authority, and to feel as successful as he perceives Curly to be. And Curly wants to abandon the ladder altogether, realizing that happiness does not come innate with his status. Jimmy then leaves.
So, I believe, I don't remember none of this. I think I stopped a little bit earlier than that. But I believe if I had played it again on my own time, I could pick up on all the symbolism and be like, oh yeah, that's what that was for. Oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. I only played it the one time and got confused. And then it's been like, I played this back in November, actually. It's damn February now. You feel me? So it's been a while since I even thought about the game or even went to edit the video. You feel me? But yeah, I feel like if I played it again, I would have picked up on a lot of what the hell was going on. So I think that's my fault on my part. You feel me? It's 45 minutes. I just want to understand like what happened with damn Anya.
Leaves as Curly receives a letter from corporate, which is impossible to decipher during the game.
Impossible to decipher. You can't go in the
to
code.
Another out of reality scene, watching a TV inside the ship's storage area. Channels include an employee instruction video showing the corporate process an average person may follow to be successful, having a job and a family. The next channel has a black hole destroying a mass in space, perhaps foreshadowing the upcoming destruction of the crew's current lives, or of some deep internal desire Curly may hold to see that destruction happen. There's a science show about the atom, talking about how everything is built on minuscule things. Then, there's some men hanging up meat in a small room, foreshadowing again Curly's upcoming change in position on the ship. There's another cartoon, now where the company supports the intake of artificial substances in order to increase the working power of its employees. Then, there's a skeleton losing its limbs and collapsing. And finally, an ad for mouthwash. Hey, they said the name of the game. The mouthwash is a substance which kills 99.9% of germs. Specifically, it relates to fire and agent of destruction. The fine print beneath the ad even says that you should consult a medical professional before, while, and after using the product, which again is just mouthwash, and that the company holds no responsibility over any harm the product might cause.
That potent? And they was drinking this.
Another interesting tidbit on the idea of a company not caring about the effects of its products, even in the case of the crew that they're paying to carry it. 6 days before the crash.
Break the news.
The team throws Curly a birthday party,
explaining
that they're only allowed one group event per year and chose Curly's day to surprise him.
I was thinking, damn, I might just have to drop this a whole nother video at some other point, you feel me? But, I was thinking, damn, he got the letter, sat on it for a couple days, and then told him, you feel me? This was the next day.
Being captain, he does have to make the cake himself, though. The crew seems to be in good spirits, asking Curly to give a speech, although the generally happy vibes of the scene are a tad off-put by the disarmingly huge frickin' knife on the table.
Yeah, that was a cleaver,
He then reveals that they will all be laid off after the completion of the mission, something which he was told to inform them of closer to the end, but that he felt they had a right to know. Swansea reacts unsurprised, Anya panics thinking of her economic future, Daisuke remains silent, and Jimmy immediately begins throwing his anger out on Curly, blaming him for this decision which he had no control over, claiming he must be happy to be able to rid himself of his responsibilities without guilt.
I think what I noticed early in the gameplay, I remember this too. I'm not sure if I said anything about it. I don't think I did. But I remember early, I was thinking Day was a girl, but then it turned out to be a dude, and then I had a thought like, oh, Anya's the only shorty on the ship, which I thought was thought was strange.
Jimmy berates every crew member one by one and refuses to acknowledge Curly's pain in the situation. Jimmy displays his habit of forcing his own securities into the mouths of others, describing the crew as dirt beneath Curly, showing how much he idolizes the captain's position and despises himself, villainizing Curly using his own internal dialogue. Curly cuts the birthday cake as the face value happiness of the crew breaks down. 2 days prior. Curly and
So 4
Anya
days
have a
passed
late
since
night
that day.
discussion in front of the lounge's moonlit sky screen. Anya points out a broken pixel on the screen, describing how it's always in the back of her mind. Curly, on the other hand, waves it by, claiming that one little issue won't break the illusion, a reference perhaps to the illusion of peace among the crew, and reveals he prefers to see the larger picture. This conversation illustrates the difference between Anya and Curly. Curly is able to look past problems in hopes of preserving a happy appearance, while Anya is forced to acknowledge the effect even a seemingly small error can have on something. She still likes the overall display though, showing her desire to be able to look past the worst aspects of something. Anya then considers the fact that there are still 8 months left on their journey, and questions why the company would put locks on the medbay, but not on the bedrooms. This fact, alongside many posters hung around the ship detailing how the crew would be docked for using medical supplies, shows that the company cares more about protecting its financial assets than the crew itself.
Yeah, small shit like that I wouldn't have, like, I don't think I picked up on that at all. I think I was just too worried about reading the damn dialogue, you feel me? And her also being the only shorty, I guess that makes a lot of sense why she would be worried about that. So how did she get pregnant? Am I forgetting who it was? Did they tell us? I don't know. She gonna explain it.
On my first playthrough, it was only after she asked this question that I really realized that Anya's the only woman on the ship, which is pretty scary to think about.
Did she say second playthrough?
On my first playthrough, it was only after she asked this question that I really realized that Anya's the only woman on the ship.
Yeah, okay.
Which is pretty scary to think about. Curly responds that obviously it's for safety reasons, not even seeming to realize what Anya is suggesting here. This really goes to show that while Curly often has best intentions for his crew, he has a naivety about his perspective on things. One day before the crash.
Okay.
Curly starts out in the medbay, and it's of note that Anya has a book entitled Up or Down, The Illusion of Choice sitting on her counter. This could be representing her feelings of a lack of control in her environment and the desire to regain some. Curly discovers Anya has taken the ship's locked gun case and finds her crouched in the cockpit, clearly panicked. She reveals that she is pregnant and that Jimmy is the father.
When did she
we
say
now
it
know
was
that
Jimmy?
Anya was unable to protect herself without dorm locks and was assaulted, how many times is unclear, by Jimmy.
Oh, it was Jimmy. And it had us playing as Jimmy for the majority of the
She
game.
was pregnant for a period before finding out, and given the 8 remaining months of the mission, Anya would have to give birth on the ship, making the assault undeniable, or conduct an unsafe abortion. Anya says she's hidden the gun case, which she could not open herself, so that Jimmy could not get to it, clearly afraid that he would use it in an attempt to remedy the situation. Curly explains that he will do anything to help her, which is funny because he would not give her the gun to protect herself. And his first instinct to try to solve the problem was just to talk it out with Jimmy.
Was it?
Interestingly, when Curly asks her who did this, Anya responds, "I told you," after which Curly understands immediately that it was Jimmy. The implication being that Curly was aware, in some degree, of the uncomfortable situation between Anya and Jimmy, yet up until this point has emphasized keeping the peace over Anya's safety.
Oh, shit. Damn. This shot right here tells us who it was. Because she never said it herself, but then they shot this shot right here. So we'll just assume if Curly wasn't it, the only co-captain, the only person in that seat right there is Jimmy.
In this way, he's taken away her voice and kind of left her at the disposal of Jimmy. Curly says that the entire crew, including Anya, is his responsibility, and yet he refuses to do what needs to be done. He refuses to help her protect herself. He refuses to stop believing that Jimmy can be better. The day of. Anya, emotionally distressed, having told Jimmy that she was pregnant and having received an unsettling response, is bent over the medbay bed, which seems to have a little drawer beneath it, but more on that later.
That's where she put the gun at.
She doesn't feel safe whatsoever with Jimmy on board, and Curly once again tries to take responsibility over the situation by just talking to Jimmy. Curly insists he will fix everything to Jimmy, who understands that his life will be ruined when they land, as he will be charged for the assaults. Jimmy has a doomsday mindset at this point, expressing desire to end everything now by crashing the ship, so that they can still be simply tragic victims of a horrible accident and nothing has to come to light. He appeals to Curly by saying that he will also lose all of his status, and is just as guilty, having allowed the situation to get to this point.
Oh, that's the video. I'm thinking I kicked some over here and it's jiggling around.
The conversation is so psychologically charged as Jimmy is continuing to push responsibility for something he's done onto others. Curly did fail as a captain by not truly acting on Anya's concerns, and his mindset of being able to push past any mistake prevented him from fully acknowledging the problems occurring on his ship. Jimmy is still entirely responsible for his actions, for assaulting Anya, for being unable to control his emotions, for forcing his beliefs onto others. In this case, both parties have played a part in the grand scheme, making Curly an interesting dynamic character.
So, so Jimmy manipulated Curly into crashing the ship. Because I just read the dialogue just now, he was saying, damn, when we get back, they're going to look at you like, yo, you let this happen. You feel me? So, we might as well crash this bitch now. That's what he was saying, basically.
He's not a hero, he's not a villain. His actions have a very human complexity to them. He shows trying to do the right thing and accepting responsibility, but in a naive way that ignores the overall issues. Jimbo, on the other hand, is a flaming trash rat. At this point, Jambalaya suggests crashing the ship is the solution, tells Curly he'll fix everything, and then walks into the cockpit. Curly doesn't try to stop him?
Oh,
Are we meant to think that Curly didn't understand what he was about to do? This moment is the most crazy to me, as it seems like the final moment of just letting it happen that Curly commits. His greatest moment of weakness was allowing Jimmy to get into his head the idea of dying a hero, of not having to think about his life's meaning anymore. He hesitates. He lets Jimmy enter the cockpit, and the introduction scene of the game plays out. Jimmy sets the ship to crash into an asteroid, disables autopilot, and dooms them all. Only after the warnings go off does Curly realize what he's just done, and runs into the cockpit, where his body takes the full hit of the collision.
Oh, I forgot that happened. So that's why he was fucked up, because he was right there in front of him. Scene in
the game's intro, when Jimmy is hallucinating being chased by the Pony Express mascot, baby crying can be heard, foreshadowing the pregnancy, an upcoming connection between the mascot and responsibility. 2 months after the crash. The crew is stranded in space, the ship now half filled with emergency foam. They sit in the lounge discussing whether or not they should break into the cargo room. They've withheld up until this point, since entering would dock additional pay from their final checks if they're saved, which would really go to show how much they acknowledge that the company gives no craps about them, given that even in a survival situation, they would still dock their pay. It's interesting to point out that the Pony Express was an actual mail service that ran for only 18 months starting in the 1860s. Where a train of horse riders would carry mail from America's east to west coast in only 10 days.
So what the only thing I was really confused about was how did Anya get pregnant and the chronological order of things. You feel me?
The company preferred to hire orphans or people who wouldn't be missed given how dangerous the job was. They went bankrupt quickly following improvements in the telegraph system. They finally agree, giving their steadily dwindling supplies. Anya asks Jimmy, who has proclaimed himself to be the new captain, to get the captain's scanner from the cockpit, which is necessary to unlock the cargo room. Jimmy visits the medbay first, finding Curly, who everyone besides him believes is the one who crashed the ship. Curly's body is horribly maimed. Covered in burns, he has lost his limbs, his lips, and his eyelids, removing his ability to talk and immobilizing him. He has hence gone from an active player in the story to a forced viewer, unable to close his eyes or look away as the scenes unfold.
Damn, so how you sleep? He just
Jimmy
be up?
berates a clearly nervous Anya for being unable to feed Curly his painkillers, which he claims is her only job.
Oh, shit. You know what's crazy? I remember her dialogue being, like, stuttery. You feel me? Like, she was just like, yeah. So, and she was talking to Jimmy the whole time, so it makes sense how her dialogue was the way it was when she was talking to Jimmy. Yeah, this one of them games you gotta play more than once to really pick up on everything.
He suggests she is a useless nurse and views her as cowardly and bothersome. His opinion of her is given to the player, as the scene is played at the beginning of the game. This skewed perspective defines the player's initial idea of Anya. Without knowing their relationship, her attempts to awkwardly suck up to Jimmy, and her need for help with the emotionally draining task of force-feeding the crying Curly painkillers, makes it seem like she's just a nervous person. In reality, of course, Anya is acting to avoid retaliation from her abuser, for whom she has no protection, and at the same time has been caring for and successfully keeping Curly alive despite his horrendous condition for 2 months now.
Yeah, I just thought she was just like a nervous person. You feel me? Nervous about the situation they were in, not because of Jimmy. You feel me?
Jimmy gives Curly the painkillers, then finds Anya crouching in the lounge, distressed by Curly's pained sounds.
You had the nerve to play the sounds again? How did you get it down his throat?
Jimmy seems to question why they're either bothering to use the medical supplies on Curly. Well, Anya explains that she believes a person is not defined by their worst moment, expressing a desire to forgive Curly for nearly killing them. Jimmy then suggests that they agreed to keep Curly alive for different reasons. His, you can imagine, is far less kind.
She was saying that to cope with the fact that she has to now live on this fucking ship with Jimmy, knowing what the fuck he did. So she was saying, I just have to believe that our decisions don't make us monsters. You feel me? So she's trying to just like force herself to just be like, to either get over it or just deal with it. You feel me?
Jimmy leaves to go talk to Swansea, who's forbidden everyone from entering the utility room, claiming that it is full of emergency foam which he has to slowly clear out, that if anyone else goes in there they could cause a puncture and send them all into the void of space. I'm honestly kind of surprised how Jimmy follows Swansea's ruling on this, even when he's not actively guarding the door. Game-wise it makes sense, but I feel it might also hint towards the fact that Jimmy holds some amount of respect for each member of the crew,
Yeah, I
excluding
remember every
Anya,
time
who
I
he
try
tends
to go in
ignore.
there,
Jimmy retrieves the scanner and opens the cargo room.
he would say, we can't go
The
in
crew
here.
is
Swansea told us
distressed to
not
find
to.
that they are hauling exclusively mouthwash. Hit with the dark reality that over a year of their lives was going to be spent moving such an insignificant thing, and now they are likely to die for it as well, understandably makes everyone pretty upset. Anya points out that the sugar content intended to make the mouthwash more palatable offsets the effectiveness of it as a disinfectant. Swansea immediately notes the ethanol content and breaks his 14-year sobriety streak by
Isn't
drinking some,
ethanol like
to Anya's
lethal?
dismay.
The bottom line, ethanol found in alcohol beverages is safe for most adults in moderation. So they had 14%? Much ethanol is dangerous. Nigga, I got video proof of me Googling this shit. They're telling me a bunch of numbers. I don't know how much of that is a percentage. But basically, if I'm to guess, the 14% in these bottles isn't deadly enough to kill him. That's why they've been knocking these bitches back over and over. You feel me?
Daisuke continues to joke lightly, still having confidence that they might be saved, and Anya is extremely distressed. I do wonder if she is simply mourning the loss of hope the unopened cargo had given her, or if she's panicking over the addition of alcohol into her already perilous situation. 3 months post-crash.
Okay. This
Jimmy
I
wakes
remember
up
this.
in the lounge
This was
next
a
to
day that
Daisuke, where the crew has become
Curly
sleeping as
was
the doors have
whining
been
and
blocked off by
complaining in
foam.
the med
You
bay.
can hear Curly's pain sounds happening in the background. It's fun to note that Daisuke has a Game Boy and 2 weights near his bed, kind of showing his still
I didn't even
somewhat
notice that
childish
Game Boy.
interests. Looking around the lounge, you can also find an active game of Sorry, which has pieces associated to each of the crew.
Really?
Blue for Anya, green for Jimmy, pink for Daisuke, and yellow for Swansea. It's notable that Curly does not have a piece, which could represent the fact that he's no longer an active member of the story. There is a common social trend of disabled people being infantilized, to be viewed as a not fully matured person. Once Curly loses his agency, his ability to move and communicate, he is at the will of the rest of the crew. Even to the player, who was introduced to Curly the patient long before Curly the captain, he may be thought of as more of an object than a person. The game even has an achievement for opening and closing Curly's mouth several times in a row, knowing that a lot of people would immediately play with his face. Jimmy feels like he is...
Hold on. What's up with people?
Jimmy wants to check with Anya if Curly is already at his painkillers. He ends up finding Anya and Swansea in the cockpit having a late-night discussion. Anya is crying and telling Swansea she completely understands, which I take to mean they're discussing the cryo chamber pods in the foamed-up utility room, but more on that later. Jimmy asks if Curly has been given his pills today, and he insists that he be the one to give them to him this time.
Yeah, I never noticed how short Jimmy was being with Anya, to be honest. I thought, in my mind, I'm thinking Jimmy is just being short and to the point because he has to take the responsibility of being in charge of everybody here. That's why he was a no bullshit type of person. You feel me? I didn't know that he was only being short with Anya because of such and such. You feel me?
Upon returning to the med bay, Jimmy expresses concern over how the rest of the crew is perceiving him, likely assuming that Anya and Swansea were
Look at
discussing
them
him.
teeth.
He gets upset at the stress of being in charge, then angrily thanks Curly as if it's his fault that Jimmy had to take charge. He feeds the panicked Curly the pills, the audio suggesting he possibly beats him to vent his frustration.
Did I hear this?
4 months after the crash,
I don't
Jimmy
remember
finds
him beating
Daisuke
his
passed out
ass.
in the hallway, having drunken some mouthwash.
Was that
Daisuke
the first
explains
time?
that his mom found him this internship, and that he joined because thus far in his life he feels like he hasn't succeeded in anything. With no goal in life, he hoped to prove something in completing the job, to make himself feel like less of a total screw-up. This reveals the sadness behind Daisuke's sunshine persona. While an upbeat voice thus far in the game, Daisuke never had a positive self-image. He cares strongly about what others think of him, which has resulted in him being easily influenced, even so far as to start drinking the mouthwash alongside Swansea. Daisuke is a relatable character, as someone who's just trying to get positivity out of a horrible
Daisuke and
situation,
Anya were the only,
which
like,
makes it
two
all the more
people
sad
I
that
was
at this
kinda
point
like-
it seems like he's also accepted that they're going to die.
Kind of like, damn. I think when Daisuke died, I really had like I really had a pause. You feel me? I had to like really understand, like, damn, he really just had to go. You feel me? When Anya died, it just kind of surprised me. You feel me? So those are only two people that I really like had a concern about dying for when they did, type shit.
By saying that he hopes his mother doesn't blame herself. Jimmy finds Anya in the lounge, who herself is considering drinking the mouthwash. She tells Jimmy that there's an additional stash of painkillers on a wall-mounted med box. However, they'd have to chop away at some foam to reach it, so they need to be very careful as to not cause a breach. Jimmy goes to retrieve the axe from Swansea, who is dancing drunkenly in front of the giant monitor. Swansea gives up the axe by swinging it into the monitor, causing a giant crack to form in the sunset display, this being another act of foreshadowing for a future event. Jimmy takes the axe and successfully reaches the med box. Anya comes over and gives him a big cheer for it, almost as if it was his own plan. This is likely for 2 reasons. A, she knows that Jimmy feeling like he is contributing decreases the chances of him becoming angry, truly at himself, but of course he pushes his stress outwards onto others. And B, to warm him up to be requested to give Curly his pills again, something that is still a major emotional struggle for Anya, who at this point is at least 5 months pregnant, so you could assume gruesome tasks are getting only more difficult for her to stomach. Jimmy blows up on her, ignoring the fact that her nausea is entirely his fault, and claiming that unlike everyone else, he is actually trying to fix the situation. He lists through a sequence of tasks he's done, totaling a stunning of 5, completed over the course of 5 months, and all of which were actually Anya's ideas. The emphasis being, of course, that he has not done anything himself, yet claims he is taking full responsibility as the new captain of the ship. Jimmy feeds Curly his pills, telling him he now realizes how hard it is to be in charge, and promises to save them both.
Yeah, Curly was just a whole walking
5 months
biohazard.
after the crash. Daisuke wakes Jimmy, frantic as Anya and Curly are trapped inside the med bay by a large door. Anya reveals to Jimmy that she has purposely sealed the door, telling Jimmy, "You were right, I should have done this all along." We can assume whatever she's about to do is what Jimmy told her to in response to learning she was pregnant. Anya wishes she could keep believing that a person's worst moments do not define them, a saying which I believe she was trying to embrace in order to make living alongside Jimmy all this time bearable.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
What else could she do in this contained space but force herself to move past what happened? But in the end, she couldn't. How could anybody? She laments that this is the best decision she has ever made, and that she is going to take care of it. Her character arc began as someone who has no control over their situation, who could only try to manage how she reacted to the horrors pushed upon her. But now, she's finally able to make a decision for herself. Jimmy convinces Daisuke that they must enter the utility room despite Swansea's guarding, in order to climb into the broken ventilation shaft and crawl into the med bay, opening the door from the inside. Daisuke is hesitant out of fear of messing up again, but gives in to save his crewmates. Jimmy pointedly says, "We can save Curly, yeah? Interesting?"
At this point, I'm just watching this video at this point. Hold on, let me see if I could skip ahead real quick. I'm really trying to just understand the story, and this is for the people who don't understand on my part too. Hopefully you don't strike me down, please don't, because I already got one. I already got a warning. Yeah, hopefully if you do see this, please don't strike my shit, because I'm just trying to learn, and you're doing a very good job so far explaining what the hell's going on, even stuff that I didn't even pick up on my own. You feel me?
He assures him that he will wake up perfectly fine and likely won't remember anything. One could wonder if his confidence about this comes from having used this method previously. While you're in the lounge building the cocktail, if you check the sorry board, you can see that the blue pieces have been knocked over. An additional gamey note, Daisuke teleports behind the player constantly while he's making the cocktail, and this is to avoid having to animate locomotion, which requires a lot of tech support to get to look not slidey all over the floor. There's only one other case in the game in which someone is seen traveling, and it's kind of misty, just kind of fun to think about.
Yeah.
This next scene is another out of
confused about that too. I was like, what the fuck is he? It wasn't confusing. It was just it was really setting me up for like a jump scare. You feel me?
reality scene between Jimmy and Curly. I wasn't exactly sure where it happened in the timeline, but the sorry game is in a similar state, so I decided to talk on it here. Curly explains that life has ups and downs, and that the good parts are only good as a result of the bad parts being bad.
Can I get a thumbnail for that part?
Therefore, we just have to learn to appreciate the little alright moments and keep moving forward. Jimmy leaves to find a knife to cut the cake, walking through the ruined and dark ship, which has been filled with tall piles of mouthwash.
Where was the knife? On the cockpit?
He grabs the axe, which has been lodged into the pilot seat of the bloodied cockpit. The axe is interestingly stuck in the chair that Curly sat in during their evaluation earlier.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
The scene feels like Jimmy's mind trying to justify his action, using Curly's own words to specifically validate the horrible things he has and will do to him. At the same time, he's under extreme pressure knowing that Curly, the very ideal of what he wanted in life, is watching everything he does. Jimmy's perception of Curly is
that what those eyes were?
with a rage-inducing despising of how he is above Jimmy, fighting a respect for Curly's opinions and a guilt for what he's done. Swansea, who is still drunk, refuses to let them into the utility room. Before drinking the cocktail, he tells Daisuke that he's an idiot, a failure of an engineer, and that every act of hard work he puts into the job will only result in him becoming uglier, older, and meaner. Swansea is obviously pushing his own insecurities onto Daisuke, likely insulting his naivety and good nature, while actually mourning his own lack of joy for life. At the same time, this suggests he is actually concerned that Daisuke may recall the same.
I'm like, just now I was like, why haven't y'all made more of that tonic shit earlier? But I remember the machine was covered up with foam, so it makes sense.
Same fate as him,
and the fridge
and that while he's
too.
horrible at expressing himself, he wishes Dai could keep his spirit. Some people have suggested Swansea and Daisuke share some sort of a father-son bond, or that Swansea relates Daisuke to the dog photo he has on his desk. Daisuke doesn't respond to the insults, seeming to have a hard time verbalizing when faced with complex negative emotions, similar to his silence at the birthday party company closure news. The only time we see his sadness otherwise is when he's drunk on mouthwash. Swansea drinks the cocktail.
It's crazy to say that you got drunk off mouthwash.
Passed out Swansea.
I thought he
Interestingly,
died.
his room key has a dead goose keychain on it. Dead birds in general tend to represent failure and hopelessness, white ones in particular the loss of innocence. The goose itself may relate to the idiom, kill the goose that lays the golden egg, which describes killing or destroying something beneficial by demanding too much of it. All of these aspects may...
Whoa, hold on, if he had the key on him, that's why we couldn't get in there, because he locked the door.
Relate to Swansea's view on Daisuke as something pure he doesn't want to get ruined. Or it could foreshadow the death of Daisuke's willingness to help, and desire to please others as a result of somebody asking too much of him. Daisuke and Jimmy enter the utility room to discover that it had never been filled with foam at all. However, only one of the 4 cryo chambers is still functioning. Entering one would freeze a person for 20 years, significantly increasing their chances of being found and rescued. Despite Jimmy's claims that Swansea was clearly trying to hide the pod so that he could use it for himself after everyone else had died, Daisuke refuses to believe that Swansea would do that, instead applauding his work and clearing out the area.
He's probably trying to save it for them.
I believe Swansea was protecting the pod, but with the intention of saving it for Dai. Or perhaps the pregnant Anya? Given his acceptance of death and his dislike for how his own life turned out, it's unlikely he would care to steal the only one for himself. The conversation Anya and Swansea were having in the cockpit that night may very well have been Swansea explaining his plan and wanting to see Anya's opinion. Her cut-off line, if I understand completely, may have been her accepting that Dai should be the one to take the pod, as the youngest and most likely to overcome this traumatic experience.
Oh, so you're saying that conversation they had in the cockpit was them talking about, yo, who should get it, And then they both came to a realization and conclusion like, yo, Dai should get it because he's the youngest here.
Jimmy and Daisuke look to the collapsed vent, which is clearly rife with open electrical wires, sharp metal, and tight spaces. Dai, again expressing his respect for Swansea, wishes to wait to ask him how to best go about this, but Jimmy convinces Dai that he must climb into the vent now to save the others. He appeals to Daisuke's desire to please by telling him how sure he is that he can succeed, that Swansea will be proud, that the whole crew is counting on him. At this point, you may wonder, why can't Jimmy just go into the vent? The very reason for Anya to lock herself away was Jimmy after all, and so it would make perfect sense for him to climb in. Of course, it's because he's a selfish coward whose greatest desire in life is to force others to handle all his problems.
Well, damn, shorty.
So, Daisuke gets into the vent, and very quickly his pained screams echo into the room, followed by the sound of him entering the medbay and calling out to Anya.
So why? Yeah. She didn't answer neither.
8 hours until judgment. Via a bloody path and a lower-to-the-ground red handprint, we see that Daisuke dragged his now punctured body through the medbay to unlock the door. Jimmy and the awakened Swansea bring him out to the lounge. Daisuke repeatedly apologizes while bleeding out, terrified of either disappointing or bothering other people. Swansea requests the extra disinfectant from the wall med box.
Nah, that's in your
However,
gullet.
Jimmy had to use it in order to make the drugged cocktail, and proceeds to blame Swansea for forcing Jimmy to have to have drugged him. Just one of the most insane responsibility pushes to date on Jimmy's ever-growing list. They split up to search for alternatives. At this point, the pink piece of the sorry game has been knocked over. When entering the medbay, Jimmy's vision of Anya on the medbay floor is completely obscured, showing his refusal to acknowledge her and what he has caused entirely. Jimmy
That's
then
what that was? He just didn't want to... Damn! There's a lot of symbolism and shit that I just completely looked over.
heads to storage to retrieve some mouthwash to disinfect Daisuke, and enters a guilt-ridden hallucination. He passes by Daisuke's grave, marked by one of the pink hibiscus flowers from his shirt, which are known to represent happiness, sunshine, and good luck. Jimmy follows a path of blood into a boss monster maze of storage platforms. Here, he has to quietly navigate the area, avoiding a blind beast that is only visible through the captain's scanner. The monster is a horrifying horse with an incredibly long neck,
That was a
which
horse?
the game describes as aimless, restless. You can't run from it. Reminiscent of the internet myth Long Horse, which warns humans of danger.
Long
In
horse.
this instance, the horse is likely a metaphor for Jimmy's rejection of responsibility and feelings of guilt. Jimmy actively attempts to avoid its attention via staying silent until it moves away, mirroring his avoidance of accepting responsibility.
Really?
This also explains why you can only see it through the captain's scanner.
Oh, that's
which,
a
being
that's a
captain in itself is
mouth.
supposed to represent someone who's supposed to be taking charge.
Oh, I'm thinking. I thought those were eyes in a mouth. You feel me? That's just a horse.
The eyeless creature cannot see Jimmy if he stays silent, much like Jimmy refuses to see Anya. Jimmy retrieves the mouthwash and pours it onto the heavily pained Daisuke, who continues to apologize and proclaim that he messed up. This moment could emphasize Daisuke's insecurities, or also
stomach
point
is
out his
swelling.
youth, someone like a child whose first instinct is to apologize when faced with something going wrong. Swansea reveals his desire to have learned from Daisuke, who he admits is just a good kid trying his best, despite not being the smartest or the most hardworking. He mourns a world in which Daisuke could have helped him find joy again. Also, side note, Swansea's hands look tiny here, don't they? Everyone else's hands are humongous comparatively, especially Anya's look huge every time she lifts them up. And Swansea's got little baby hands here, just gonna freaking side note that.
Okay, you just had to get your shit off, huh?
Swansea then swings the axe down on Daisuke's head, fulfilling the earlier foreshadowing of him destroying the sunrise on a large screen.
Oh, that's what that was? Ah, damn. Basically saying, when he swung the axe at the screen, that was symbolism for Daisuke being like a ray of sunshine within the crew in this time where it's real stressful for everybody. You feel me? That's crazy.
This is the game's only example of a mercy killing. and one of many examples of Jimmy yelling about how he was going to fix everything despite not having done anything, nor moved to stop Swansea despite a hesitation in the swing. Jimmy reveals that he knows about Swansea's plan to hog the pod for himself, which he refuses to even consider was not in fact the plan, since he himself would have absolutely done that, and Jimmy can never pass up on an opportunity to push his own concepts onto others. Swansea reveals he knows about the sexual assaults. I've seen a lot of people online claim that if Swansea had known about the assaults, he would have put an end to Jimmy right away, which is clearly not the case. He did know. Again, showcasing the complexity of people. Swansea is not a secretly heroic father figure hiding behind an illusion of alcoholism. He's a messed up guy, who in the end still acts on his own desires. He didn't confront Jimmy. He didn't try to work alongside the crew for solutions over the last few months. He took out his frustration on how his own life went on Daisuke all the time, similar to how Jimmy does to Curly now. At the same time, I truly believe he was saving that pod for Daisuke. He made moves in the interest of somebody else, and deep down he hoped things could get better. It's interesting to note that after that scene, if you go back to the sorry board, Daisuke's pieces aren't knocked over anymore. Anya's still are, though.
Oh, really?
I'm not sure if this is just a game error on the developer's path, or perhaps a message that the following events aren't actually part of reality and this is still like a skewed experience, but just interesting to point out. We now see that Anya committed suicide via overdose. Her earlier reference of doing what you said to likely means that Jimmy's immediate reaction to learning that she was pregnant was around the lines of, can't you just take some pills and handle it?
What was I about to say? Oh, yeah. So, like, you know how, like, not crazy, you know how, like, observant you have to be to, like, notice the pieces on the sorry board and, like, understand, like, yo, this is for them, this is for them. I guess not, because if the dialogue is color-coded, then you don't have to be that observant. Never mind. I mean, not to take away from Shorty from really taking the time to realize that, but I think if I would have just like understood or like looked hard enough, I probably would have been like, oh, this is, you feel me? So
either way, Anya got the final say in how she died, and once again, Jimmy's problem was handled by someone else's sacrifice. Interestingly, the gun drawer built into the bed is open besides Anya. You can remember that she was kneeling in front of it the day she told Jimmy about the pregnancy. Given she was the only one who knew where she hid it, she may have taken one last crack at opening it before turning to pills. Or perhaps she left it as a final good grace to Curly, so that he had an out if he was somehow able to access it. Or even, perhaps it was a message to Jimmy, that Curly's life these last few months was pure agony, and that someone needed to take responsibility to end it now that she was gone.
Laughing?
Curly begins to laugh, or possibly sob, as Jimmy takes the gun, forced to watch as it ends up in the very hands Anya hid it away from. The next series of events is a little unclear. It seems Swansea attacks Jimmy with the axe, chasing him into the cockpit at one point and bursting through the window. Somewhere around here, we enter a hallucinatory journey through the ventilation, in which the game instructs Jimmy to take responsibility for what happened to Daisuke. Jimmy passes by a workstation with Daisuke and his game pieces on it. Daisuke's is knocked over as to represent Jimmy's direct hand in his death. Swansea's piece is noticeably absent. We see a specter of Daisuke looking up at his shadow before walking away, replaced by another hibiscus. In one section of the vents, Jimmy is forced to walk backwards.
Yeah, I couldn't understand
and once
this
again
part
abuses
right here,
Curly's advice to keep moving forward by choosing to ignore the small collection of Daisuke's items on the ground. Even attempting to look at them while walking away forces Jimmy to start over. The distorted image which covers the screen with each failure might be Swansea's face. And we can note Swansea's character model lodged behind a specific grate. Jimmy falls through a pit beside a grave, flying past tons of poly posters which have been modified to include blood, mouthwash, and axes.
Oh, really?
Jimmy then falls into a sideways version of the medbay, where tons of axes lodged into the wall point him to the vent.
This is where shit started getting
This could imply Swansea chased him into the vent in the last scene, forcing him to repeat the crawling travel he made Daisuke do. At one point, an axe flies through the vent wall, possibly representing the thing that Daisuke stabbed himself on, or Swansea taking a swing at the vent knowing that Jimmy was in there.
Oh,
Jimmy
really?
crawls until finally landing in the utility room, before a gun and a tied-up Swansea. Using the gun on Swansea triggers another out-of-reality scene, in which the two fight each other inside of a large crypt devoted to Daisuke. After successfully shooting Swansea 3 times in the head, we cut to Jimmy and him talking. This time Swansea is sat in a chair but does not appear to be tied down. Swansea explains that he was once a hopeless drunk clawing through life, until one day he foresaw his own death in an abandoned ditch and got sober. He got a wife, a job, and kids, and hoped to give them more than he had. He laments that even as he gained the good things in life, he never felt satisfied, never felt happy. In the end, he says the best days of his life were before all the grinding and the routine, when his life was dirty and rough and cruel, and the only problem he had was an empty bottle. This monologue relates to Curly's previous concerns about feeling unsatisfied in his life.
That's what you got from all
even
this?
After achieving such great heights. Mouthwashing comments a lot on what makes a person happy.
I was just reading this and not really trying to understand what it was that he was saying. You feel me? I feel like I was the worst person to try to play this game. You feel me? I feel like if I really sat here and tried to like dissect it and understand it on my own instead of like trying to just play it for entertainment values, I would have put this game up there with like one of the best I played in a while. You feel me? But since I wasn't like fully not committed, but fully like mentally here into the story, I couldn't understand it. Plus, on top of that, and bouncing back and forth between time, I really couldn't focus. So I just focused on my attention on trying to like be entertaining. You feel me?
On the good life society pushes to people, where you get a job and have a family. On the cycle of giving so much of oneself to working in order to chase that ideal. And then, how difficult it can be to accept when that ideal doesn't make you happy. When all that work pushing to get there didn't feel worth it. On the feelings of uncertainty that come when not knowing what to do next. What can you do? Daisuke died having barely gotten started in that cycle, and Swansea ends contemplating what might have been had he never started it. Swansea wishes he could have protected Daisuke. Jimmy tells him that he's going to save them all.
It's too late.
And then shoots Swansea in the head. We seem to return to reality. Swansea is dead, tied to a chair in the utility room. Strangely, the foam does not appear to have broken 3 of the pods in this moment. This might be another example of the game showing us that Jimmy is an unreliable narrator.
Oh, really?
Now, Jimmy leaves the room, walking through a psychotic version of the ship's halls.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
In which Curly's eyes are watching him from every angle. Jimmy enters a large area where the most iconic scene in the game takes place. Curly and Jimmy are the last 2 alive, and Jimmy is dead set on keeping it that way.
Iconic scene.
In a vile act of forced survival, Jimmy repeatedly shoves a chunk of Curly's leg into his own mouth. Despite Curly's best efforts to resist, Jimmy, again ignoring the prospect of using himself as a form of nutrients, forces Curly to survive by cannibalizing himself. All so that Jimmy can feel like the hero that kept him alive.
Yeah, that's crazy. He forced him to eat his own pieces.
Jimmy then has a psychotic meltdown scene in which Curly offers to be the villain and take all the responsibility, allowing Jimmy to be the better man in the end. Jimmy claims they can both still be heroes. Curly, being the person Jimmy respected most on the ship, is the only one who which he feels willing to apologize. Not to Anya, who he assaulted, not to Daisuke, who he sent to his death, and not to Swansea, who he personally killed. He's stuck in a delusion that if he can save Curly, the only person he views as a true hero, and he can still redeem himself.
I think in this moment, I remember reading the words and just assuming Jimmy was talking to Curly, but at some point, because he wanted to be what Curly was to the people and be respected like he was, the dialogue that started, like after a little bit, it started saying Curly, but it was really Jimmy saying this shit to Curly because he wanted to be what Curly was. So he started to see himself as Curly. That's why the dialogue, you feel me? But I feel like if they did that, they would have kept the dialogue green and then just changed the name. You feel me?
And in thinking this, he refuses to acknowledge that Curly surely wishes to die. He selfishly keeps Curly moving so that he can pretend he fixed even a single aspect of his many grievous mistakes.
It wasn't no mistake, dog. You did what you did.
Jimmy breaks down in tears.
Why is he on fire though? Is that like symbolism? Whoa.
We then cut to the vent again, in which Jimmy confronts a giant red mass which contains several horse fetuses.
Those are horses?
This represents Jimmy's original sin, and the one he had refused to acknowledge over the course of the entire story. Referencing his joke about being sexually interested in horses, he now interacts with Polly, the company mascot, as the embodiment of his unborn child. He must embrace a centipede amalgamation of Polly, coming in contact with it instead of running.
That's what I had to do? Because every time he touched me...
He then passes through a hall of the employee licenses. Noticeably, all of Anya's are obscured by the others. This further emphasizes his rejection of what he did to her, and of her as a person. As the only one on board, he placed miles beneath himself, so that he could feel important.
I would have never figured that out, bro.
Polly, the baby incarnate, reveals Jimmy's feelings of being trapped and misunderstood as a result of the pregnancy.
I feel like the first playthrough I had, I just thought it was a horror game, so I was too busy trying to, like, on top of me not understanding a lot of what was going on, I was trying not to get scared, so my focus wasn't on the story for real. Playing it a second time probably would have picked up on a lot of stuff, understanding nothing's really gonna happen. Like, nothing scary really is gonna happen, you feel me?
The idea of Anya informing the others made him feel like a victim, whose reputation was being damaged by, in his own words, one mistake. He doesn't deserve to be punished for that. He's being punished for the baby existing at all, he thinks. Through all these feelings of hopelessness, villainizing, stressful responsibility, Jimmy never once apologized to Anya, instead redirecting all of his guilty feelings toward Curly. At this point, he likely feels that he has to, as his mind is rejecting the idea of dying a horrible failure. Even if a deep part of him is haunted by his actions, his ability to redeem himself, to come out on top of that mistake, died alongside Anya. And so, Curly takes her place.
Curly takes her place?
Jimmy takes Curly from the med bay and brings him to the lounge, where his sorry piece is the last one standing. He places him on the table, the seats occupied by the crew's corpses. They cheer him as captain, happy and clearly valuing him as they had Curly. Jimmy cuts off Curly's leg and puts it on each person's plate.
That was his leg?
Then addresses him. He speaks of Curly being wealthier than them all, but being so high up that he didn't need to struggle to get food, saying that he would rather die than be on their level. He plays out a scene in which he heroically saves everyone by sacrificing the big bad Curly, but also mercifully forgives and wishes to save him as well.
Oh, so he just broke down. I thought that he put Curly into the cryo chamber thing because he wanted to do one good thing. You feel me? But it was really just a way of him being like, hey, this nigga was so up here that he didn't even think that he needed to be on our level. So I'm gonna do him a solid. I'm gonna save him and sacrifice myself for y'all. You feel me? I'm gonna do what he couldn't do. You feel me? Damn.
The ultimate hero's fantasy, in which the underdog Jimmy saves the day. Jimmy places Curly into the one functioning cryopod. He feels satisfaction in thinking he has made it up to Curly, the one person he truly looks up to, and the one person who was unable to tell him how absolutely insane he is, how much he's fucked up every aspect of the story. There is no happy ending, or grand comeuppance. Jimmy ends the story believing he has won forgiveness, that he has fixed the problem. Curly is serving as his mouthwash, a superficial remedy he used to cover up everything he doesn't want to accept about himself. He turns on the cryopod and walks off screen. He shoots himself and dies. Curly is slowly frozen, made to wait the next 20 years to possibly be forced again into the living hell that is his existence. In the end, the mouthwash represents the company's priorities of profit over people. Even that 0.1% of germs or a single pixel can corrupt an entire image should it continue to spiral. Even one mistake can become the entirety of a person. Mouthwashing is such an interesting game because none of its characters are perfect. Its jumbled method of presenting scenes makes the viewer question their initial assumption about what's going on. It's not often we get to play the villain. The game's commentary on feeling helpless when the prescribed steps to happiness don't work, it's pretty hard, especially in a society where work seems to take up so much of our lives. I'm sure there's a ton more in the game that fans will be reading into for quite a while. Thanks for joining me on this little analysis. If you enjoyed, check out my original playthrough of Mouthwash.
Oh, for sure, you got a playthrough? I might watch that, for real, for real. Okay, boom. Damn, y'all. I was the worst candidate to play that game and host it, you feel me? But now watching like a analysis and whatnot about the actual story, I got a better understanding and a better appreciation for what it was that I played, you feel me? I don't think I need to play it again. To be honest, after watching this, I don't think I need to play it again because I understand it. You feel me? And it'll just be me going back seeing everything that she just told us. You feel me? So I don't think it'll be beneficial for me to play it again. However, it was a good game. And now after watching this, it was an even better game in my mind. You feel me? So shout out to the team who made this. I forgot who it was, for real. It was pretty cool, and the story was very in-depth. I'm not gonna lie. But that's gonna be it for this video. If you liked it, please leave a like. Make sure you subscribe to join the cartel. Share your video with your friends for me so they can join the cartel as well. Make sure you tell me post notifications so I post whenever I do post. I love it when I see this video. If you want to check out her channel, I'm about to. Yeah, if you want to check out hers, make sure you go do that. I'm gonna leave the link somewhere here. I don't know where I'm gonna put it. If I'm looking at y'all from here, it's gonna be flipped, so probably up there or up there. I think it's up here actually. Yeah. So make sure you go watch the gameplay that I got. I'm out. Adios.